So, Andrew, you've been probably the longest tenured in this particular area of activity. No, I mean in a positive way, right? You're also probably on this little mini panel, probably the closest to the actual selling of actual inventory, which I'm sure has not been necessarily the easiest, cleanest path within a big organization that's changed over your years. So my question to you is a recalibration, I guess, of the same question: is how do you see, and maybe how do you currently sell the value of television, given that you have feet planted firmly in both of those places, both the brand thing and the advanced thing? How are you selling that, so to speak, to the outside world?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate the 10-year comment. And let me give a little perspective, because there are days, like I think implicit in your 1% question, where you feel like going home and kicking the dog a little bit of how come we're not a little further along. For dog lovers, I apologize, but where you have a little frustration, right? And I think it's important to take a step back a little bit and look at some of the macro trends of our business. If you look at Comcast from the sell side of it, when we launched addressable in Huntsville, Alabama, more years ago than I'd care to admit, with 7,000 homes, we did that on the back of an analog architecture. And you got to recognize that Comcast is an amalgam of walled garden analog operating companies, whether it's TCI, Continental Cable, Media One, all these companies we had to ingest. And trying to launch a digital-like solution like addressable on the back of an analog architecture was a little like pushing a string, right? So my therapist tells me the reason we have hope is that one of the trends is that we have winded our sails as it relates to the technology, right? So the cable company has now migrated from an analog architecture to digital to now a cloud-based infrastructure. You'll hear about Comcast launching our Xfinity X1 platform. It's a cloud-based architecture. Launching addressability in that environment is much easier than in the historic analog architecture. So that's one sort of macro trend that's at play. The other that I would suggest that's equally important is sort of the economic impact to the health of the company. When we started pre-NBC Universal, there was a fair degree, if we're honest with one another, a fair degree of separation of church and state between the ad business and the distribution business inside of Comcast. I remember being at an investor conference where Brian Roberts was speaking not long after I joined the company. He said, well, we're really not in the ad business. And I said, wow, this was a bad career choice on my part. And I got what he was trying to say is that the ad business, as a function of a $40 billion distribution business, wasn't going to impact the share price on if auto's up or Olympics are up, or whatever, it's not really going to materially impact the share price. Fast forward, Comcast now buys NBC Universal. The advertising business is the second largest standalone business in the combined enterprise, only behind residential video. So for us, those two impacts are driving significant change within our organization. And I think it manifests itself when we look, getting back to your very specific question, Tim, I think when we look at the value proposition, we really look at a couple of things. How do we monetize our inventory? We represent 60, 70 networks, and I'm going to make up the number, but these numbers aren't far off. 40% of our sellable impressions represent 10% of our revenue, give or take, somewhere in that ballpark, because we don't have good data tied to it, right? So in the spirit of the political season, I'll give you an analogy. We were talking with a political candidate, the agency, and there was this guy, I think, that ran the Eisenhower campaign, and he had he was having a steak and a glass of gin, and he said, I buy Fox News and Golf Channel. That's what we do. And we said, well, that's interesting. We just talked to the campaign headquarters, and they said your true target is really Hispanic independent voters. Now, when you look at data sources like Experian, eTech that look at acculturation levels, and you look at voter registration file, and you bump that up against viewership data, lo and behold, the Hispanic independent voter never watches Golf Channel and never watches Fox News. So how do we begin to apply data to help sell, monetize that long tail inventory? So that's one clear opportunity for us. The other is, as an organization that's largely rooted in a local business, if you look at Comcast, $2.5 billion in revenue, largely rooted in the spot marketplace, right? Local, regional, national spot marketplace. There's an opportunity for us to begin to compete for national budgets, direct marketing budgets, by applying that same data in distribution. So for us, better monetizing the long tail of our inventory that we currently sell, and going after new incremental budgets.
Okay, so last year, I had a panel that we kind of sort of circled around this 2 minutes an hour thing, right, as the ghetto, shall we say, of being able to do addressability, right? It's still that sort of small piece, perhaps arguably the reason why we're only at 1+% of overall television spend. Uniquely, right, a Comcast, NBC Universal, I'm not asking you to speak for the company, but I am asking, it seems to me, if you were coming at this from an outsider's perspective, that some combination of the content and the national advertising that an NBC Universal brings to the table, and the pipes of what a Comcast X1 or otherwise platform brings, should be more combinable than just 2 minutes of avail splits as the only place to do addressability.
Sure. So we totally agree. And, I think from a year ago, if you look at within the family, and Tracy hinted at this, and I think Mike ended at the exclamation point around teamwork, as these, we are going to work more closely together than we are apart. I think historically, when you look at the ad business, I kind of draw an analogy in the retail business, right, where you've got P&G and Walmart, sort of at loggerheads a little bit, distribution and product. And I think they've come to realize that, wait a minute, if we work together, we can compete more effectively with Amazon, right? I kind of think the same thing, the same parallel dynamic is going on. Programmer distributors. Historically, there was a fair degree of anxiety between that relationship around the cost of the content, right? Distribution of that content. But I think there's a recognition now, if we begin to apply that technology and data that's available on our side of the fence to the programmer side of the fence, you can begin to bring value to the marketplace. And so we've lit up our very first trial with NBC Universal inside of their VOD inventory, albeit VOD inventory, inside of C3, their national breaks in that content with addressable capabilities. So for the first time, Linda Yaccarino and her national sales team can begin to bundle audiences by leveraging that in concert with the addressable audience pool that Comcast brings to the table, and bring a holistic approach to the marketplace.